Hey guys, this is Crow3. Wanted to bring you a video today just to talk about my new favorite talent build. So, I've been finding myself really liking Echo Pulse, going back to what I originally liked when I was learning Probius. And in that original talent video, I mentioned how I really started using Warp Resonance a lot more. And while I still like it, especially paired with certain heroes like Zol or Muradin, heroes that can reliably lock an enemy hero down, so I can actually detonate the warp rifts. But beyond that, Echo Pulse has allowed me to play a lot more safely. It is the beauty of it, right? It's that boomerang for your Q, or Disruption Pulse. It allows you to QW or WQ if you just do that instantly, and then run away. You still get the damage off of your boomerang and your warp rift. So it has allowed me to play especially the laning phase a lot more safely, still being able to do reliable structure damage and position myself a lot better. And there's some also really good synergies I like about this that I'll talk about later. But this has been my favorite build now. I am back to the basics of what I thought was the basics. I love Echo Pulse. It is my favorite. And it's a disclaimer. I like all three of these talents. I think these are like some of the best level 1 talents a hero can have, and I'll use them all situationally, but I'm finding I'm using Echo Pulse a lot more now, and I'll elaborate more why. Kind of shout out to my last video. I still use Photon Barrier a lot. I probably use it most games, giving me that 40 spell armor when I have a Photon Cannon alive and inside one of my pylons. It's terrific, especially against heroes like Kael'thas. Heroes that, it's really hard to avoid their damage. It's going to come if they're targeting you, and if you want to survive it, you need this talent. So against mages that really lock on me, another one being like Phoenix. I can't escape a Phoenix. I have to fight him or die, or run away and die. Those are my two options. So fortunately with Photon Barrier, this talent, I'm able to actually win duels against mages and really shut them down. So this is one of my main talents I'll use. However, if there's no threatening mages or no mages on the team, I'm going turbocharged. I'm generally not. I find shield capacitor to be a bit boring, and at least for my playstyle, I really like to just be zooming around the map. So for myself, being able to reduce that worker rush cooldown and gain movement speed on my pylons, that the movement lets me avoid incoming damage and help myself juke. So I really like turbocharged. I use it whenever there's not a Kael'thas or a Gul'dan or some heroes that are just really strong mages. If there's not that, I like turbocharged a lot. But these are the two talents I've been going for at level 4 now. Level 7, still hate Particle Accelerator. Don't do it. Or if you do, please link me a video of you having success with it. I'd love to see. But I dance between Rift Shock and Tower Defense, and I ultimately keep coming back to Tower Defense. It is just so reliable, and it has especially good synergy with your Photon Barrier, because that means if enemies blow up your cannon, well, if you can reduce your Photon Cannon cooldown more frequently, well, you can just have more odds of having that spell armor up from your level 4 talent. So there's really good synergy between that level 4 and 7 talent, which is why I really like it. I'll go Rift Shock occasionally if I just want some more of that burst potential, but ultimately I still find that Tower Defense, the damage is terrific, and it keeps me alive, especially once again, like with heroes like Stitches, that you can block his hook with your towers. So just having them on cooldown and being able to stagger them up so you can dance behind your towers, behind your cannons, is just phenomenal. So I've been going back to Tower Defense, and also it has great synergy with your Echo Pulse. So to me, that's just a win-win. Level 10, I still love Nullgate. It is phenomenal. Occasionally, I'll go Pylon Overcharge if there's enemy heroes like Azmodan or Kael'thas that I think that are really prioritizing destroying my pylons early game, knowing that that's really what you want to do to starve Probius of mana. If they're focusing my pylons, I might go this. And it's not even for damage, it's just to guarantee that I have pylons up for team fights. However, I don't like that 80-second cooldown. It is painfully long. I love Nullgate's quick 25-second cooldown. It's phenomenal. I can use this just to help clear waves faster, do mercenary camps. And of course, you can get picks with this. You can lock down low mobility heroes like Kael'thas, or you name it, or lock down their healer if it's not a Lucio. It really helps, and especially if there's a lot of melee on your team, they will thank you for you helping them close the distance on their enemies. So once again, I love Nullgate. That's almost always what I go for level 10. Level 13, I am still just stuck on Shield Battery. It really helps me duel. I think the amount of shielding it does for my team, I think, is just a win-win. I have not fiddled enough with aggressive Matrix Power Overflowing yet. I am just so skeptical. Either one, giving your allies more attack damage. 35% is a lot, but it also requires them to be in the range of your pylon. And similarly, for the mage equivalent, you can give your fellow heroes 10% increased spell power, 2 mana per second. It's good, but the shield battery to me is just game changing, especially against heroes like Lunara or Kyraira, heroes that can poison you. If you want to survive that, having the shield battery is just so phenomenal. So I always go shield battery, to be honest. Eventually, I might try these two, aggressive matrix or power overflowing, but right now, each game, shield battery is so phenomenal. This is an interesting talent. So I know I gave Cowflare a shout out for really showing me the synergy of interference and how potent this can be. I still love it. This paired with my spell armor lets me beat Phoenixes and lets me just duel with heroes I shouldn't. It also helps me beat like Gul'dans that are so many Gul'dans love that, like the Drain Life build. This just interrupts it and totally counters them. So this has great uses, especially against like an ETC ult that you can interrupt, or a Nova ult you can interrupt. This should be your main priority at level 16. However, if there are no threatening mages, and if there are no ults or channels that you really want to interrupt, consider Quantum Entanglement. Especially if in your team you have someone like you have an ETC, or especially if you have a Kel'Thuzad. If you have heroes that are skill shot heavy, or Hanzo that base their abilities off of knowing where the enemy heroes are, isn't just targeting. This is really helpful, because the one issue with interference is that when you knock heroes away, you could unintentionally be saving them from other damage that your fellow heroes might be setting up. Like if you Warp Rift explodes someone away from a Kel'Thuzad chain, and they miss their chain, they're crippled for whatever the duration is of that cooldown. So it's kind of pros and cons. I like it a lot, but then once again, if the enemy is running away and you just get off the Warp Rift and you have this talent, that'll knock them further away from you. Especially if you don't have Warp Rift talents like Warp Resonance or Rift Shock to do that extra damage, where it might be worth it. That's one hesitancy with this. So there's great synergy, especially with the Warp Rift heavy build, which I like a lot. Consider Quantum Entanglement. So interference is first priority, but then if there's no serious threats, I would go Quantum Entanglement. Keeping enemies slowed longer lets you land more Warp Rifts. And it especially synergizes with my favorite late talent now. And this is the reason I made this video. Probius Salute. I want to give a shout out to Azmodan, not the hero this time, but the player. He's a terrific Probius player. I'm 95% sure he's the one who, after a game, he explained to me how much he likes this build, Probius Loop. What it is, whenever Rift Explosion hits one or more enemy heroes, creates a new Warp Rift in the same location. Now, I have found this to be game-changing, even more so than my favorite Gatekeeper. And don't get me wrong, there are some games where I really like Gatekeeper still, to hold down forts, but the more keen enemies are to your pylons, it can be totally negated with one Azmodan dunk, and destroying your pylons and it's over. And sure, that can be up to you to hide them, but what I love about Probius Loop is that it's so reliable and it synergizes so well with your level 1 Echo Pulse. What it allows me to do is, if I Warp Rift, let's say if I Warp Rift first, and then I do my Q, as soon as I can detonate the Warp Rift, and on the Q's return, I can detonate the Warp Rift again. I can do 2 Warp Rift explosions for just 1 Q, 1 boomerang. And what's amazing with this, it's just an endless cycle. So if there's enough CC on my team, and I put down 2 Warp Rifts, and I Q, right? I send out my disruption pulse. I blow up both of the warp rifts, and on the way back, I blow up another 2 warp rifts. So I can be blowing up 4 warp rifts with 1 Q potentially. And it's very mana heavy, so you'd want to make sure you have your pylon down. But you can see the potential for this is insane. I know it's probably easier to be seen than me explaining it right now. So know that I'm going to be coming out with some more games of me using this build specifically, and I'm going to be trying to commentate a lot more games live to kind of give you my thought processes and show you the usefulness of this. So that combo is phenomenal that I just mentioned, and why I love it so much actually. When I was playing against, maybe it wasn't Azmodan actually, but it was one Probius player. It was like on a Battle for Dragonshire map, and I was running down to secure the objective in the bottom of the map, and I remember running to the bush and then immediately getting blown up by the enemy Probius, who had 3 warp rifts in the bush, and he had this Probius loop talent. So when he blew me up with 3 warp rifts, as soon as that finished, he had 3 warp rifts up at that same exact spot. He didn't need them, but from then I was like, wow, I was really intrigued by this, by the potential of this. So it is awesome, and Probius Loop can of course work with Warp Resonance. A lot of great Probius players use the Warp Resonance synergy with Probius Loop, and I can totally see why. What I love about the boomerang effect from level 1, what I love about Echo Pulse is that I can blow up my warp rifts a lot faster, and don't feel like I'm just waiting for my Q to blow up all these warp rifts. However, regardless, I think even with the W build, it gives you phenomenal control. What a lot of good Probius players like to do, they'll go focus on a W warp rift centric build, but then at level 16 they will guaranteed get interference from war control. They'll also often take pylon overcharge over null gate. The reason being, the one downside with taking null gate if you take interference is that interference could knock enemies out of your null gate. So for Probius players that swear by always taking interference, they sometimes will just take pylon overcharge just because of sometimes the anti-synergy with null gate. For me, I still think null gate's worth it. 25-second cooldown to be able to even get a warp rift, guaranteed warp rift off on a hero, to me is still big. Especially now that I'm more inclined to take Quantum Entanglement, where it's perfect synergy, keeping enemies in the Warp Rift, keeping enemies in the Null Gate. It just works out. But ultimately, please give Probius Loop a try. I'm going to make some more videos about this. I think it is phenomenal, and I'd love to hear what you think. All right, guys, I'll talk to you soon.